Welcome back once again to the Ubuntu Server Series here at CBT Nuggets. I'm Sean Powers, and I'll be taking you through a magical journey through package management. It's not really a magical journey, but it'll be an exciting journey where you learn some stuff. I don't know. Anyway, today we're talking about package management as it pertains to Ubuntu. It's very similar to the Debian operating system or the Debian distribution. However, there are some quirks and a little bit of difference and a few differences that are specific to Ubuntu. So let's talk about them and see them in action. Now, the package management in Ubuntu and also in its underlying Debian roots is the apt package management system. Now, apt package management, we're talking about the actual installation files are deb files. So you've probably seen like package.deb, or maybe you've seen reference to those before. The underlying files that are actually installed are deb files, but the system itself is called apt. And there are a couple ways that you can install deb packages or apt packages, and there's kind of this huge debate that's been going on for a few years. Do we use the original apt programs, or do we use the newer aptitude programs? And the reason that it's a little bit strange is that there are conflicting opinions not only on users but on the heads of the distribution. So I'm going to talk about both, and then we'll move forward focusing on one over the other. So apt has been around forever. This is the original way that you manage deb files, or you manage the apt packagement system. It's simpler. Now, when I say simpler, some may disagree with me because it's simpler in each command what it does. However, there's more commands to remember, so maybe you consider that more complex. It depends on your definition of simpler. It is apparently endorsed by Canonical. And I say that because back in release 10.04, they removed aptitude from the desktop version of Ubuntu. They just completely removed it. Now you could add it back using apt and you could use it, but they removed it, kind of insinuating that this is not the ideal or the default package management system that they allow. That said, aptitude is still in the default install for the server edition of Ubuntu. However, most people take the removal in the desktop version as an endorsement of the old standby, the apt system. So that's what we're going to go with, and we're going to use apt. Also online, if you end up searching for instructions on how to do things, because apt has been around longer and it's more popular just due to its being around for a long time, a lot of tutorials are going to be based on apt-get instead of aptitude. So we're going to focus on that, but I still want to talk about aptitude. Apt also has a cool cow mascot. I really hope that I don't forget to show you that because it's cool. Aptitude is another program that installs the same files. It installs the same deb files into your system. It's newer. It hasn't been around for as long. It's more complex and more powerful. And what I mean by that is just the command aptitude alone can do all of these things. It can search for packages that need to be installed. It can install packages. You can purge or remove packages, all with the aptitude program just itself. It's kind of an all-in-one tool as opposed to a set of tools in the apt system. It's not much more amazing. So this is interesting. If you listen to people talk about aptitude, they say, "Oh, it's so much more complex and more amazing and more wonderful." Well, I would say it used to be the case. The apt-get or apt system has gotten a lot more powerful too. So it's not that much more amazing than its proponents, or as its proponents proclaim, but it is still a pretty cool program. This is where it gets a little sticky. It is the officially preferred way to handle package management in Debian. So if you're using Debian, they have officially endorsed aptitude as the preferred method for installing packages. However, that's not necessarily the case with Ubuntu, and since we're focusing on Ubuntu, that's what we're going to talk about, the apt system. These are some of the commands in action I talked about a minute ago, and it's just from a user standpoint, the difference is you just end up using one command with different flags to do the dirty work or to do the actual work, whereas with the apt system, the older system, you tend to have a multitude of commands to get the same things done. So we're going to talk about that. There's more to learn about apt because there's more commands, so we're all about learning more things, right? And we're going to go and focus on that right now. See how there's kind of more commands? This is apt-get, or the apt system in action. And I've highlighted the things that you'll use regularly. There are some other apt tools like apt mirroring commands that you can use for finding the fastest mirror and stuff like that. However, these are the main tools that you're going to be using to manipulate the files installed on your system and getting files from the different repos that we talked about in a different nugget, where we talked about the different repos that are repositories that are enabled on your system. These are the tools that we're going to interact with those repositories with. Okay, so a handful of commands. We're going to look at these on the computer in a second too, but I want to just highlight them here. Apt-get update all by itself and hit enter, and this refreshes the repo or the repository information. So it goes out and if you were at a restaurant and you looked at the menu and you heard that the menu had changed, you'd have to look at the menu to see what the changes were. And that's kind of what's going on here. When you say apt-get update, it retrieves the header information from the list of available packages, and so then it knows all the latest versions of the packages available. Apt-get install, and then this underline with the X's means that a package name, right? You install an actual package, and it installs a package and its dependencies. This is what makes the apt system, whether you're using aptitude or apt-get, so powerful and so amazing, is that if there are any dependencies, it automatically finds them and installs them alongside the package that you're installing. It used to be terrible when you had to figure out what the dependencies were on your own. Apt-get remove, you can imagine what that does. It removes the package that you installed. However, this is important to note. It does not remove the configuration files. So if you do apt-get remove Apache 2, and it removes Apache 2, and then you do apt-get install Apache 2, you're going to have the same configuration files that you had before. So just removing and reinstalling a program isn't going to fix something if all of your configuration files are messed up. Apt-get purge is like remove, however, it removes the packages and the configs. So if you do apt-get purge Apache 2, it's going to get rid of all the configuration files as well. That's a great way to make sure your system is cleaner if you're erasing or deleting a package. These two kind of work in concert, or do the same thing, not necessarily in concert. Maybe it's more of a dueling banjos kind of thing. Apt-get upgrade upgrades all of the installed packages, which is kind of what you would expect. It's easy to confuse upgrade and update. And I don't necessarily have a great mnemonic or anything for you to remember. Just know that update kind of updates the menu. Okay, there's an update to the menu, and you want to see what new stuff is for sale at the repository as far as versions go. And then apt-get upgrade actually does the upgrading of your system. Dist upgrade is very similar to upgrade, but the difference is that with apt-get upgrade, and I'll be honest, as versions of apt go on, these two get more and more similar. Okay, but upgrade, it upgrades packages that are already installed. So if you have something installed, upgrade will upgrade it if there's if it found that there's a new version when it did the apt-get update. Dist upgrade will upgrade all the packages even if new dependencies are needed. So even if you have to add other packages because there's new dependencies with the new versions, dist upgrade will upgrade everything. I generally use dist upgrade. You can use upgrade, but dist upgrade will cover everything. Just watch as you're doing it, because if there's a package that you specifically don't want to have it upgraded because of a version change that'll break something in your environment, well, then it's important to watch. But that's true whether you're using upgrade or dist upgrade. So you can use whichever one you want, but I usually use dist upgrade. This is a little bit different. With aptitude, you get to choose the one command. However, with the apt-get system, you need to say apt cache search and then the keyword that you're searching for. So this isn't searching for a specific package. You can search for keywords that describe the package or the package name, and it searches the database. In fact, it's this database that it searches, right? The repository information database, that's what it searches for a specific package, and then it'll tell you if there's a package that you can then use apt-get install to install. Apt-get moo, that's the cow thing. This is nothing more than a fun Easter egg, but it's cute. So we're going to look at that when we get to the command line. let's go and see how these things work on the system, because this is something that you're going to do if you're administering a system. You're going to be upgrading and installing and purging and dist upgrading and possibly mooing. So let's go to the command line. Okay, here we are in our Xubuntu desktop. I'm going to SSH into our server, and I'm not going to talk about how we're actually on a different server in here because you already know that. But here we are on our server now, and we're going to do, first of all, let's update the menu. Remember, we're going to update the items on our menu, the updated packages. So sudo apt-get update. I'm going to keep trying to hammer home the differences between update and upgrade. Update just updates your menu, updates if there's, updates your database for what's available. And so we've done that. Now we know that our database of available packages is completely updated. So now what we could do is we could install something, but let's upgrade first, okay? So apt-get upgrade, and it'll show us what it's going to do first. Now there's only a handful of packages available right now. There are, it looks like Python has been updated a little bit, and there are just a small handful of packages available to be upgraded. Now, unfortunately for us right now, there are none that are held back. If there were some that needed other dependencies to be installed, or things like usually the Linux kernel, if there's an update to the kernel, it'll say 0 not upgraded, or it'll say like 1 not upgraded, because we're not running dist upgrade, it's not going to upgrade all the packages that require additional dependencies that aren't already installed. So if I say no here, and instead of upgrade I say dist upgrade, it's going to actually be the same in this case. You'll see they look exactly the same. However, if there was a package here that said and 1 held back, and there was something like a Linux kernel version was held back and not upgraded in the upgraded command, down here all of them would be. There's always going to be 0 not upgraded in using dist upgrade. So that's the difference here. We don't get a good example of it now. But like I said, I usually use dist upgrade and then read through what's actually being changed to make sure I want everything upgraded. Here, I'll hit enter. It defaults to yes. It will download all of the packages. And I'm not using my local mirror. I'm using the internet, so it takes a little bit longer to download, but I have a decent connection, so it's not too bad. And boom, we're completely installed. Everything is installed. Sometimes if you install a package, it will need to be rebooted. And a place in the Ubuntu server that you'll see that, let's exit and open up a window again. If we had to reboot, it would say here on our initial login screen, system needs to be rebooted because of like a kernel upgrade or something like that. We have to reboot if there's a kernel update. And that's usually the only thing that requires a reboot, is something like an actual kernel upgrade or libc upgrade or something like that. Anyway, that is upgrading the system. It's as simple as that. It usually finds all the dependencies on its own. It's pretty slick. But let's say we want to install a package. Let's say we want to install Apache 2. But let's say we didn't know what it was called. Let's just say, oh, we want to install Apache. No installation candidate. So what we could do is use the apt cache. Now you don't have to be root to use apt cache. Search for Apache. Oh, there's a whole bunch of things there to search for. One trick that I use, and this isn't necessarily specific to apt, this is just a trick that I like to use when I'm searching for something, is to use the pipe command. So that's the really tall thing. It's usually above the backslash on your keyboard, and it's the pipe symbol. Through grep, and grep is a search tool that works on the command line. Apache. Now, just a really quick, this is, we talked about this in the Linux in the Real World series, but I'm going to give you just a quick 2-second explanation. Grep, it's going to grep or search for Apache within the results of this command. So this pipes the results of this command, this whole list of stuff we just see, into the grep Apache command. And why am I searching for Apache when I just searched for Apache? Well, because apt cache searches for keywords. And you'll notice a lot of all these are related to Apache. So this vlogger, it's a virtual web log file rotator or parser. However, you'll notice that Apache is not even in there. The word Apache is not in there. Well, I know that if I can find the Apache program, Apache's going to be in there, in the name or in the description. So let me hit enter, and now the list is going to be shorter. It's still a long list of stuff, but it's going to be shorter. And we can scroll back up. libapache is not what we want. We know that. Oh, this is starting to look good. Apache 2. Oh, there's that. Apache 2. Oh, see, there it is. Instead of Apache, it's Apache 2. This is the Apache HTTP server meta package. Bam. It's not always extremely simple to find on the command line, but if you use enough tools, you can do it. Another thing, if you're in a situation where you can't scroll, I really love this pipe command. So now we're searching for Apache, and it highlights the word Apache in the results. But now let's pipe this through the more command. Now what does more do? Well, it paginates for us. So now we don't get to see the highlight anymore. However, now we just have, this is the first page, and bam, Apache 2 is right there in the top. Hit the space bar and it goes page by page to the results instead of scrolling back up if you don't have the ability in your terminal to scroll back up. Anyway, just a couple cool little tricks. Back to apt-get. Sudo apt-get install Apache 2. I know that's the name of the package. Now it tells us a few things. This is where aptitude and apt differ. They're going to recommend and suggest different packages. Here, what happens is it tells us in order to install Apache 2, I have to install these extra packages. So all of these things have to be installed. These are dependencies in order to make it actually work. So unless I install all of these things, it's saying you can't use Apache. So I'm going to install all these things. It also recommends that you install these things. These are suggested, things that help or things that may be useful. Now, www browser, if you're on a server, that's not going to be very useful at all. So it's not like the all-knowing sage that can tell you what's going to be useful. But sometimes you'll see something here, you'll be like, oh, you know what, that will be extremely useful. Like Apache 2 SU exec allow to substitute users that Apache can run as. Oh, that might be useful. That might be something I want to install. And you would add that to the list of items. In fact, that's something that I haven't shown you and I didn't mention earlier. So I'm going to say no here. Apt-get install Apache 2. If you have more than one thing you want to install, you just do space and add it to the list. Apache 2 doc. So Apache 2 and Apache 2 doc, you could just keep making a list as long as it's separated by a space at the end, and it will install all of them. So I'm going to hit enter now. And now, along with all those other things that that it required, it's also going to install the document file, or the docs for Apache. Okay, I'm going to hit enter. It's going to go through just like the upgrades did and download all the packages, although this time now it downloads them and then installs them. And now here it started the Apache web server, it installed the documentation, and so then it reloaded the web server, and now we're all set. This could not reliably determine the server's default qualified domain name. We'll talk about this briefly when we talk about the web server Apache later, but this isn't a big deal. The server's still working fine. It doesn't have a DNS name for 127.0.1.1. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we talk about Apache. But that's all there is to installing a program. We can now look. CBT server, if we hit the web server, now it's working. So the Apache server is running on our server. Yay, we've installed something and it works. Let's say we don't want it anymore. There's two ways we can do it. We can remove Apache 2, and it says, okay, this is kind of key. It says now you're uninstalling Apache 2, so all of these things are no longer required. But it's not removing them, and that's the big difference between aptitude and apt-get. Aptitude, if you remove a package, it will remove all of the unused dependencies as well. Apt-get doesn't do that. It uses a separate command, apt-get auto-remove, to remove the old dependencies. It's just a different way to do it, right? So we'll say, yes, we're going to remove Apache 2. It's only removed Apache 2, but when it removed it, obviously, well, it's not running. Oh.
I guess this is really good that we did this. It removed, if you remember back at the very beginning when we searched, Apache 2 is a meta package. So it's a name, it's a meta package. It describes a bunch of different tools that work together to provide a web server. So until we do auto remove for all of those other things, because we still have the Apache worker running. We still have the Apache 2 binary files that are running. We still have the Apache 2 common files. So Apache itself is still running, even though I removed the meta package that pointed to all those tools. Do I want to continue? Yes. It stops the server now finally, and now it's going to remove all of those tools. I'm glad we had that little error here. I usually just go and type apt-get auto remove by default to clean up my system, but here's an example of why you would want to do that, because if you don't, it's not really removing anything except that meta package that points to Apache. Now, if we do refresh, it's not going to load. Okay, so at least this makes sense now, and we've removed all of the other tools. So that auto remove in apt-get will get rid of all of the no longer needed tools. Hopefully that makes some sense. Again, I'm glad we had that little mishap that I didn't realize that the other packages that it had installed were actually the binary and the common and the files that are listening. So until we did the auto remove, there was still a bunch of junk on the system. Not only was there junk, but there was actually a daemon still running. So we're almost through the list of things to do with apt. If you start installing and removing a lot of packages, it still gets messy. There's going to be things, if you've modified files, it generally won't delete files that you've modified specifically. So you may still have a messy system if you install and reinstall and uninstall all sorts of programs on your server. So I don't necessarily recommend doing that because it starts to get crufty, if you will. Kind of like in the Windows world where the system registry starts to get ugly. Well, same kind of thing here. You can get leftover files and orphans in the database for apt-get and things like that. Okay? Anyway, that is how to use apt-get. We've done just about everything you can with apt-get except for this one. apt-get moo, which does nothing other than give you an ASCII cow. And who doesn't love an ASCII cow? I have absolutely no idea why it does that. It's just an Easter egg, and now you're in the know. You know that you can create a cow on the command line with apt-get. One last thing I want to talk about in this nugget before we move on are PPAs, or Personal Package Archives. This is not used as much in server as it is in desktop, but basically it's a way that developers can roll their own repositories, okay? So we talked about repos before, like the multiverse and universe and backports and all of those things that are official. Well, though, yes, there's a whole bunch of them. However, not every developer can contribute to that. And if you're a developer and you want to have your own repository, so that's the deal. It's your own repository for your package, and you want to be able to allow people to use that to get updates, PPAs are the way to do that. The reason that they're not available on server is, remember we talked about Canonical supports, and this is from a different nugget, so you have to really think back with me. Canonical supports a handful of the repos, like the main repository, and the updates repository, and the security repository, and even the restricted repository. Canonical officially supports. The universe and multiverse repositories are community supported. So just the Ubuntu community, not Canonical itself, provides support. So you just get like a groupthink kind of in those repositories. With PPAs, it's even worse in that you only get the one developer or the team of developers who are releasing the PPA. They're the only ones supporting it. So that's why a lot of times you won't see it on server. And Canonical is kind of wise, even though I put a frowny face here. You can't even add a PPA by default on server. You actually have to add this kind of cryptically named package in order to add PPAs by default. They are extremely simple to use, which is their claim to fame. You add a repository with a one-line command, and bam, it's part of your repositories. The syntax to do it is dummy-proof, and what I'm talking about here is I can never remember which way the command works. There's a command, it's called apt add repository or add apt repository. I'm not even sure which one is correct, like which is the original name, but when the Python software properties packages installed that provides you with a binary for both, or one is probably a symbolic link pointing to the other. But I can never remember it. I usually use this because all the other apt tools start with the word apt. So apt add repository, and you put the repository information we're going to look at on the command line in a second, and it will add a repository for that one developer's application or applications. So just that team or that developer are supporting that repository, but you've added it with the one-line command. It's really simple to do. So let's go look at one and see how to install it. Now we're using server, so we're going to have to install Python software properties. I've actually already done that on the server, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. And it's not something, I mean, nowhere in the name here would you suspect that this is how to install apt add repository, but that's actually the package that does it. On the desktop installs of Ubuntu, it's installed by default, because usually things like small desktop applications or specifically new and unreleased or uncommon versions of a specific application will be released as a PPA. And so a lot of times on the desktop you're going to use them, not so much on server. But you can do it on server. This is Linux. We're allowed to shoot ourselves directly in the foot if we want. Alright, it was actually tough to think of a PPA that I would want to use on a server, but I came up with a good one. If you're a gamer, you may have heard of Mumble. Mumble is a server and a protocol used for low latency chatting, like voice chatting. It runs on a server that everybody connects to, and you can get it for Ubuntu with a PPA. Ubuntu. So in the background here, I've been searching for it. And Ubuntu, it is in the Universe repository. However, this is a case where if you want the latest version, it's not going to be in the Universe repository, right? It has to go through the proposed repo and everything else before it's added to Universe. So here, if you want the cutting edge Mumble server software, you would use a PPA. And to do that, you do simply this: sudo apt or add apt or apt add, like we talked about, repository, and then this is the format for installing a PPA. PPA colon the name of the package / the release. This is going to be different based on whatever system that they're hosting their files on, like their Launchpad is generally where things are located. So this is always going to be different. You're going to have to get this information from the actual PPA provider. Okay, but in our case, this is what we want. I'm going to copy this. Did they include the sudo? They did. And I'm just going to paste this. So add apt repository, also apt add repository would have worked. Hit enter. Oh, I lied to you. I didn't install that yet. Sudo apt-get install Python software properties is the package that we need. Again, a really bizarre named package. And now we'll actually be able to use add apt repository. Hit enter. So here it says this is where you can go for more information about it. We're about to add the following PPA to our system. Well, that's what we want. So hit enter to continue. It does a couple things. It adds a source to our sources.list.d folder so that we can, when we do apt-get update, it's going to pull that information. But it also imports the public key for this particular PPA, and that's what makes it really nice. So we don't get complaints that it's an unsigned or we don't have it's an unknown signature on a file. If we use the apt add repository, it's going to automatically install the public key from that source itself. Really, really convenient, because this is really kind of a pain in the butt to do manually. So now we do apt-get update. It's going to update all of our information, and you'll see here on the bottom, when we get to the very bottom, oh, where did we missed it. It must have been at the top. I'm going to make sure that we see it. Bam, right there. So this is where ppa.launchpad.net, that's where it's stored, right? So that's where we actually downloaded the menu items that are available, the version items, and Mumble. Now this is actually the client it's trying to install. It would need to be GUI, so it would install a whole bunch of stuff for us, like X11. We're not going to actually install it. I don't want that on my server, but that's an example of how a PPA works. Then once your PPA is installed, it works just like any other repository in your system. I know we're running out of time, but if we go into the apt folder, now you'll see that in the sources.list.d it added a file that contains information on where to get that. deb and deb source, the location, the release distribution precise, and in the main repository. So this is adding a new source or a new source to our apt system, and that's all there is to it. It's all done. So that's how you use apt. Aptitude is similar. We're not going to talk about it, but if you want to research aptitude, if you want to do it the Debian way, or you just prefer, a one-stop shop for tools, you can use aptitude. It's not going to break your system at all. It's a very capable tool, and it'll do all the same things that we are doing with apt-get. But you can look at this. It's just I focused on apt because it's more commonly used, and Ubuntu apparently officially supports it. All right. So that's how apt works. We've gone through installing and updating and upgrading and deleting and purging and mooing and all of those things that we can do with apt, and we're going to do that throughout this series as we install packages. Now it should make sense. Later on in the series, we're also going to talk about doing some automatic updates, to keep some things automatically updated, but that's in a later nugget. It's a little more complex, and it's a daemon that runs as a cron job. But for right now, this is how you handle your package management in Ubuntu. I hope that this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.